The meeting will begin shortly. Please find your seats. The meeting will begin momentarily. Please take your seats.
When I wake up in the morning, love, and the sunlight hurts my eye, and something without warning, love, bears heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. impossible to fade. When someone else instead of me always seems to know the way, then I look at you and the world's alright with me. Just one look at you and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face, and when someone else instead of me always seems to know the way, then I look at you and the world's alright with me. I just one look at you and I know it's gonna be a lovely day.
Not a soul up ahead and nothing behind. There's a desert in my blood and a storm in your eyes. Am I the king of nothing at all? And you're the queen of nothing at all. Well, I remember the fight and I forget the pain. I got my hand in your pocket and my key in your chain. Am I the king of nothing at all? And you're the queen of nothing at all. Through the wilderness, you and I, we walking through the emptiness.
You may be surprised that NASA is a climate agency. Most of what we know about our changing planet comes from NASA data, and it's from our fleet of over 24 satellites that form a single great Earth observatory. And it comes from our findings of over 60 years from our platforms in the heavens. NASA technology is helping firefighters spend more time fighting wildfires. NASA satellites are analyzing soil moisture, which helps farmers decide which crops to plant. NASA data helps city planners and health workers track air pollution from the surface of the ocean to the International Space Station. NASA information from NASA satellites, it drives action. Freshwater management, monitoring floods, protecting oceans, saving coast. We even launched a spacecraft to detect dust storms from space, and it's now detecting methane leaks on the Earth below. The threats to our planet will continue. Our eyes in space will take it all in. What NASA learns in space, we make publicly accessible through the Earth Information Center. It's a one-stop shop for this game-changing information. The challenge of the climate crisis is here and now. Let's answer it from above.
Please welcome Senator Bill Nelson, head of NASA.
Morning. Think back to 1968. It was a tough year. 2 assassinations, the tumult of the Vietnam War. Remember the tumult of the Democratic Convention. And we at NASA make a bold decision that we're going to take out of order the first flight to the moon. Christmas Day, 1968. Apollo 8 is circling the moon. And the crew, Borman, Lovell, and Anders, are in that orbit, and on their 4th orbit, they come from the far side of the moon, and all of a sudden, Bill Anders sees Earthrise, and he says, "Where's my camera? Where's my camera?" He takes this picture. It has become an iconic photograph for us to understand the first time we'd ever seen ourselves from a perspective far away as this blue and white, creative, beautiful planet suspended in the middle of nothing. And space is nothing. And we have this unique vantage point from space that gives us the perspective when studying planet Earth. Now take a look at this. This is from low Earth orbit. There in the middle is the Red Sea. That's the Nile River in the distance. Look to the upper right and you see the Sinai Peninsula. At the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula is Jebel Musa, the mountain of Moses. And then look at that thin blue line at the rim of the earth. That's our atmosphere. That's the light being reflected in our atmosphere, and that sustains all of us. As you orbit the earth, it's that thin little film, And from space, I could see how we're messing it up. That thin blue line separates us from the rest of the universe. And it drives home how important it is that we work together to protect our planet from the increasing threat of climate change. These visualizations, they help us understand the Earth system, like the human body, comprises diverse components that interact in complex ways. Heat, of course, is, as we heat up, it's absorbed by particularly the ocean. The heat and the moisture influence Earth's weather patterns. Rainfall significantly is altered by the heating up of the Earth. The oceans rise. In the last 30 years, the east coast of the United States, in 30 years, the Atlantic Ocean has risen 7 inches. From our spacecraft, we can also spot forest disease. We partner, for example, with USAID to help farmers in poor developing nations. We work with them. We can spot not only disease in crops and trees, we can tell the moisture content of the soil, so what the farmer should, in fact, plant in his crops. And as a result of that, we can spot drought. We can alert as to the wildfires are coming. And we can even, as Moses did when he spoke to the rock in the desert, we can find water underneath the desert floor. Now, we need to work together to address the needs of our climate. And that's why NASA works with our partners all over the world. So with this information, we want to share it. We want to share it with everybody. All of our data is publicly available. We set up a physical Earth Information Center, but we put it online at earth.gov or at nasa.gov. You can see our data in near real time of what is happening to the Earth. I can tell you, in my eyes as a politician, as I orbited the Earth every 90 minutes, I saw something else. I looked and I did not see racial division. I did not see religious division, and I did not see political division. What I saw is we are all in this together as citizens of planet Earth. I wish we could send every head of state into space, because if they could see what I saw, it would change your perspective. Now, our voyage takes us beyond our Earth. We're going back to the moon in order to learn to go to Mars. It takes us beyond just our climate observations. We're looking at our solar system. We're looking at our vast universe. And as we are searching the heavens in a universe that is 13.8 billion years old, we're looking for other Earths. And when we do that, and when we look for life, we learn about ourselves, us Earthlings. All right, I want you to come with us on this great new adventure, an adventure of the golden age of space exploration. Throughout America's story, there are defining days. Days when minds change, hearts fill, and imaginations soar. Days when visions transform the trajectory of the American story, which is our story. Doing what is hard and achieving what is great, that is what stirs humankind. That's what unites us. With inspiration and innovation, no Herculean effort is too large. No moonshot is beyond our reach.
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
A new generation, the Artemis generation, stands ready. Ready to return humanity to the moon and then to take us further than ever before to Mars. Let us continue the quest to unfold this universe. And let us continue to find unity in our discovery. So together, let us continue to dream the impossible dream that now becomes real. And then let us traverse the untouched terrain of the once unreachable stars.
Please welcome Katie Couric.
Good morning, everyone. How lucky am I? I have two of my favorite people I get to talk to on one stage. So please welcome Jose Andres and Jane Goodall. I clearly got the plum assignment today, so we have so much to talk about and not a ton of time. So let me get right to it, Jose. Can you pinpoint a particular moment in time when you realized you could use both your love of cooking and food to help so many people in need?
Quick story. My mother, she was a nurse. We saw what nurses did during the pandemic. But beyond watching my mom working in the hospital, because we didn't have a nanny, and my father and my mother both work in the hospital, we will be exchanged right there in the emergency room between father and mother, just taking us to school or taking us home. But my mom was an excellent cook. For her, love was cooking. My father too. But my mom, at the end of the month, when there was no more money left, she will open the fridge, which will be empty. And like a magician, we'll be able to make croquetas, those bechamel fritters that my brothers and I will be fighting to see who ate the last croquette on the tray. I'm only saying this because then moving 15 years later, I arrived Washington, D.C. in 1993, and I went to cook for the few in a restaurant. But they didn't realize at that moment, watching my mom making croquetas out of nothing could serve me then to not only feed the few, but feed the many. I went to a place called This Is Central Kitchen. It's where I met President Clinton. This Is Central Kitchen was an amazing place where food provided hope to people. A guy who was a bartender, who saw that everybody was talking about food waste, but he said, actually, we're not wasting food. What we are wasting is people's life. I saw a kitchen that was giving hope to homeless, training them to be cooks. In the process, feeding the homeless population in D.C. In the process, people like me being able to hire those men and women. I began going to volunteer to that kitchen. And I began sharing the same lessons I learned from my mom. Robert Egger told me at the very beginning, in 1993, and this impacted my life forever. He told me that philanthropy seems very often is about the redemption of the giver, when philanthropy must become the liberation of the receiver. Who was going to tell me that that humble croquette of my mom that she made with love for me and my brothers, that same mentality of doing anything we can with nothing, using love and creativity, then could help me join an organization as a young cook where I learned the power of food to build longer tables.
That's so interesting. I did a story on Robert Eggers when I was a local reporter in Washington, and that was an amazing organization, the DC Central Kitchen. You went on to start the World Central Kitchen then in 2010 after the devastating earthquake in Haiti. Did you recognize immediately, Jose, that you would continue to do this kind of work, or how did it evolve from this beginning?
So watching the power of food to change life through this Central Kitchen, that became my life obsession in a way. But World Central Kitchen really came out of the simple idea that in an emergency, you send nurses and doctors to take care of the wounded. In a fire, you send firefighters. In an earthquake, you send rescue workers with dogs to try to find people alive under the rubble. After Katrina, I saw places like the Superdome that somehow we forgot to feed people in a place that actually was the easiest place to feed people. Because an arena, I realized, is not a place to see Taylor Swift sing or the New Orleans Saints play football. An arena is a gigantic restaurant that entertains with music and sports. How we forgot about feeding those people for a week. That's the moment that I thought, well, who we should be sending to emergencies to feed people? Lawyers? Lawyers are great people, and I have many friends who are lawyers. But I thought, let's make sure that my profession is the one that shows up in those emergencies, rallying the call for one simple thing. Big problems have simple solutions. Sometimes the beginning just starts with a simple, humble plate of food.
Let's... Jane, I've had the pleasure of interviewing Jane many times, and your personal story is so inspiring, Jane. In 1960, you were just 26 years old. You ventured into the Tanzanian rainforest to study chimpanzees. Looking back at this moment, now that you're 90, which is just unbelievable, Jane, how did you have the courage to do something like that at such a young age?
Well, it wasn't courage at all, because, you know, when I was 10, I'd saved up my pennies of pocket money. It was during World War II. And I found this little book, no TV back then, Tarzan of the Apes. Just had enough to buy it, read it, fell in love with this glorious Lord of the Jungle. And what did he do? Married the wrong Jane. Right? Yeah. So anyway, of course, I knew there wasn't a Tarzan, but that's when I dreamt I will grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them. So it wasn't courage, it was following my dreams. And I was lucky. You talked about your mom. My mother, she was the only one who didn't laugh at my dream. She said, if you really want to do something like this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and if you don't give up, you hopefully find a way.
And when did you have some kind of epiphany, Jane, when you realized you could turn your work in conservation and animal studies and have it make a dramatic impact, that you could not only be a scientist, but a true leader in your field? Did you have an aha moment that said, I want to share my work with the world and make a difference?
Yeah, sort of. But remember, I started off not as a scientist because we couldn't afford university. I only got my degree later. But And then I went back to Gombe, and I was having the best days of my life out in the rainforest with that spiritual connection with the natural world. And people say, why did you leave? Started a conference. By then there were 6 other field study sites. Wanted to learn about chimps in different habitats. But we had a session on conservation. And it was shocking to hear that across Africa, chimpanzee numbers were dropping, forests were being cut down. And I just knew. I went to that conference as a scientist, planning to spend the rest of my life there. And I left as an activist. It was like that. It's like St. Paul on the road to Damascus. I call it my Damascus moment. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any dreams of, becoming what I have become. I just wanted to help the chimps. Learning about the chimps by visiting the different study sites with money, again from National Geographic, I learned about the plight of the African people, the crippling poverty, the lack of good health and education. And I flew over Little Gombe National Park, had been part of a great forest belt across Africa. By the mid-80s, I was shocked. It was a little island of forest, this national park. All around the hills were bare. And it hit me. These people are cutting down the forest because they're struggling to survive, and they need money from charcoal or timber or more land to grow food for their growing families. And so we started a program to help the local people find ways of making a living without destroying the environment. And that program, which is very holistic, it includes scholarships for girls, it includes microfinance so that the villagers can take out tiny loans. Dear Muhammad Yunus, I'm so glad what's happened for him. And
so you went really from studying animals to studying people. And it seems to me each of your respective areas of expertise, Jose, you food, Jane, you the natural world, are both integral to the human experience. Who doesn't love food and nature, right? So has the passion people feel for both of those things made it easier for you all to create movements around these things, Jose?
Obviously. Her love for protecting animals and chimpanzees, that tells me that me as a cook, I need to make sure that I'm part of the conversation that allows me and everybody, the army of people that provide food, from farmers to cooks and everybody in between, to make sure we do it in a way that in the process of feeding humanity, we are not taking away the forests and the animals that also are part of humanity itself. So having the opportunity to be meeting and working and calling friends, people like Jane, with what she's done and people like her, gives, in a way, people like me that kind of thought process of, in the process of feeding the world, I cannot be creating a world that is worse. That's why in Gaza, in the very early days of the confrontation, when we began feeding in Israel because it was the right thing to do, and at the same time we began feeding in Gaza because it was the right thing to do, because we were here to feed humanity, we realized that we needed kitchens. And we needed kitchens that they were sustainable, because the people in Gaza, with no other option, they were cutting trees. And trees, whatever tree was left in Gaza, they kept cutting them. That's why we began bringing a kitchen. We brought thousands of them that was using briquettes. We were using solar. And still to this day, we're doing hundreds of thousands of meals, making sure that whatever tree was left in Gaza was not going to be disappearing. The same we can say about Haiti. The same we can be saying about many countries in Africa, that all of a sudden we realize that in the way we feed humanity, in a way, is not giving an opportunity to humanity to thrive. So who was going to tell me that the same fire that makes my profession something like I love about my profession could be the same fire that takes opportunity and livelihoods from people, that breaks nature apart by destroying the ecosystems, that gives that possibility to the fauna and flora to thrive. So all these things are highly interconnected, and it's very important we all keep kind of relying on each other. That's what this Clinton Global Foundation does. What I learn, I try to share with others, and what everybody knows, they try to share it with me. All together, we become better.
I have to ask you about what happened earlier this year, Jose, when 7 people working for World Central Kitchen in Gaza were killed by Israeli airstrikes. I know how devastating that was for you and your colleagues. And you actually, for a moment, seriously thought about shutting down World Central Kitchen in the aftermath of that tragedy. What changed your mind?
Well, imagine, I was in the Spanish Navy. I served a year and a half, but I was never in my first time in a war zone was Ukraine. We lost people in Ukraine. But we've seen that what's been happening in Gaza, it looks at times that it's almost like a war against humanity itself. Obviously, the people I was supposed to be there. I was tired, and that's why I was not there. The people that died, some of them were good friends, like Somi. But we need to remember that before those 7 non-Palestinians perish, hundreds of other humanitarians perished before that. And the world almost didn't know about it, on top of civilians. So for me, the moment, yes, I realized, though, that in the worst moments of humanity, the best of humanity shows up. When I was in Israel, where we were feeding in the kibbutz in the south and in the north, next to Israeli chefs, many of them women, were asking, Jose, I have another passport. I would love to go Gaza to show solidarity with the people of Palestine. And I had Palestinian women telling me, if I could go to Israel, I will go there to feed, to tell them that I don't have anything against them. These are the voices of humanity. That's what I see in the world. And that's why we all need to be asking always for peace. We cannot just keep fighting wars and nobody even understand why they are happening. And food, in a way, is the way I see that people give love. The first time we receive love, and we never realize, and that's why we are also connected to it, is when our moms, as we come into the world, brings us to their bodies. And our mothers feeding us or telling us, I love you and I care for you. That's the attachment forever we create with food. And that's why for me, in emergencies, to see that these hundreds of thousands of people, not only World Central Kitchen, but other organizations, that while we are here talking, they are out there providing hope and relief to others. In this case, food sends a message of love, sends a message of peace. People that love hummus, like they do in Palestine and in Israel, they should not be fighting each other.
Jane, I'm curious, you travel all over the world, you talk to kids, you do lectures, you do so much important work. How do you motivate people to not only care, but to act?
Well, you know, I can't help saying, though, Jose, that many of our youth group are growing food. So we're linked in many ways. Anyhow, so when I'm traveling around the world, I'm giving talks, and I'm meeting many people who think differently from me. So I find it's useless to argue with them. They're not going to listen to me, little old me. But tell stories. You have to reach the heart. And, you know, Jose, you're reaching the heart through food. My youth program, Roots and Shoots, began in '91. It's now in 71 countries. And the last country joined last week, and it's in Ukraine. So we have members from kindergarten through university. And the big difference with this program is that the young people choose their own projects. But each group must choose a project help people, a project help other animals, a project help the environment, because it's all interrelated. And also, because we bring the young people together whenever we can, it's usually virtually, but face-to-face is better, they are learning that much more important than the color of your skin, or your language, or your culture, or your religion, is the fact we're all human beings. We all laugh, we all cry, we all can love, and we all must eat.
Do you feel encouraged by young people? Do you feel that they are much more interested and passionate about issues like climate change than perhaps older generations?
Well, you know, the young people are learning about it from a very young age now. So when I was a very young child, you know, these issues hadn't cropped up. So today, what do I find? My greatest reason for hope is the young people are now in 71 countries. They're all working to make this a better world. They're not only choosing projects, they're rolling up their sleeves and taking action. And as we speak, you talk about as we speak, things going on, these young people, they're making the world a better place. They're learning that we are one human family. And I just came from Los Angeles. It was International Peace Day. And we had 50, we call them peace doves. They're made out of old bed sheets, 20-foot wingspan, and flying on poles. And it was just so moving to see 50 of these huge white peace doves carried by young people going on a parade.
You have said this is, quote, the most consequential voting year in terms of the fate of our planet. Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, for ages and ages I've been saying, you know, we're surrounded by stories of doom and gloom, and we need to know what's going on. And, you know, I've always said, well, we do have a window of time, but I don't know how big it is. Now, yesterday I hear it's 5 years before we reach tipping points from which maybe there's no return. But we do have this window of time. And if we get together, then we can start at least slowing down climate change and loss of biodiversity. And the young people are passionate. I mean, it's their future. We've messed it up. We've been stealing their future for a long, long time. But now we've got together with them and help them to slow these things down so that they have a future.
In fact, you have a whole campaign you're embarking on and a little prop you want to share with us.
The thing is that this year is, yes, it's a very special year because there have been 48 elections around the world. And, you know, I think many people have got fed up with politicians, and many people I've met just say, well, I'm not going to bother to vote, there's no point. But every vote counts. And with the world in the mess it's in today, okay, maybe you don't particularly care about any candidate, but choose one who's more likely to protect the planet, which means your future and your children's future. So
vote for nature, I'm voting. And vote for food, and vote for peace.
And do you feel as hopeful as Jane does in terms about of the young people you encounter, Jose?
Well, my daughter Inez was inspired by Jane. My daughter right now, like many other daughters, my daughter is somewhere in Africa. She's been in Chad. She's been in the border in Sudan, working with World Food Program. Because she said, you know, I want to have boots on the ground. And the only way we're going to be changing the world is if we take some risks to do it. That gives me hope. 7 years ago in Maria, a young girl called Lola, 10 years old, 10 years old, was in charge of a line making 50,000 sandwiches a day. She was so tiny, she jumped on top of a table and she kept screaming, more cheese, more mayo, more bread. We need to do it quicker. That 10-year-old showed me, now she's about to go to university, showed me that it's people like her, people like my daughter that want to follow the footsteps of people like Jane and many of you in this conference, in this room. There is hope, but we need to give that hope to the young people. So the promises that we make here, the promises are happening in the UN, we keep them. That's the way we will keep giving hope to the young people to help us build a better tomorrow.
Jose and Jane, I was going to say you're national treasures, but you're actually international treasures. Thank you so much for all you do, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Please welcome Administrator Samantha Power and President Bill Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. They were great, weren't they? We are now going to discuss a health crisis that's claiming more lives every year than HIV, AIDS, and malaria combined. But still, it has remained grossly underfunded and largely ignored. The crisis is lead poisoning. Every year, at least 1.5 million people die from lead exposure all around the world. And many more children are negatively impacted in their cognitive development. Despite this significant and devastating human cost, funding to mitigate lead risks and exposure nowhere near compares to the scale of the harm being done, especially to children. Every year, donors are investing, listen to this, just $15 million in lead phase-out initiatives and mitigation in low and middle-income countries. It's clearly we have to do better. We need more innovative finance mechanisms and increased cooperation between the public and private sectors to meet this challenge. The children all around the world deserve better, and it's affecting all of our futures. And so, in true CGI fashion, the members of our community formed a partnership to turn this idea for a solution to this problem into action. Today, USAID, UNICEF, and Open Philanthropy are announcing a CGI commitment to action that will put us on a path toward a future where all children can grow up free of lead exposure. I'm now glad to invite USAID Administrator Samantha Power, who has worked like crazy on this, to tell you a little more about this commitment and how they're going to achieve their ambitious goal. Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and President Clinton, just the good that you have done in your life as president, before you were president, at CGI. Just thank you so much. Thank you, truly. So I have been working for 3 decades in the international domain, seeking ways to improve and save lives. And honestly, never in my career have I seen such a compelling, low-cost opportunity to make such a massive impact on a major global killer. The scale of lead poisoning around the world is actually mind-boggling. Right now, in low and middle-income countries, half of children have elevated blood lead levels, lead that slows their brain development, harms their bodies, and can even kill them. Imagine 1 in 2 kids. The damage that lead is causing to children's brains is actually estimated to account for 20% of the education gap between high and low income countries. Every year, lead poisoning is estimated to cost the global economy $1 trillion, and it kills at least 1.5 million people, as you just heard. But none of this has to happen. This problem is solvable. Decades ago, we banned leaded gasoline, long the biggest source of lead exposure here in the United States, and then we worked with countries across the planet to phase out lead from gas, which continues to save over 1 million lives every year. Of course, in high-income countries, we didn't stop with gasoline. We worked to remove lead from consumer products and to clean up industrial operations that leach into the environment. But for those sources, we didn't replicate the playbook in other countries. So kids there simply continue to be poisoned. Well, it is time to change that. And partner countries abroad have started leading the way. Countries like Bangladesh and Malawi, for instance, have launched campaigns that eliminated lead from spices and paint for a total cost of just a few $1 million or less. In just the 8 months since we began a concerted push to galvanize awareness and support for this global issue, 6 countries have committed to banning lead in paint. They are showing us that stopping lead pollution at its source is both achievable and it is affordable. USAID, UNICEF, and Open Philanthropy are announcing a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action to launch the Partnership for a Lead-Free Future, a global coalition to end childhood lead poisoning in developing countries once and for all. Up to now, as you heard, just $15 million a year in donor capital was supporting this effort. Well, today, on behalf of the partnership, I am delighted to commit $150 million to get the lead out. This is 10 times the previous annual funding levels. This is remarkable, but it is just the start. We need you all to help generate more resources and more awareness that gets governments and companies to act. So we hope you will join us and come together to help put an end to one of the great injustices of our time. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Put it on the map, as always. Thank you.
The postcode, a simple set of numbers and letters with incredible power. The Postcode Lottery Group raises funds for initiatives that improve lives, from local charities to international organizations. By turning every home's postcode into a lottery ticket, neighbors can win prizes together and contribute to a healthier, fairer, and greener world. Last year, postcode lotteries in 5 European countries donated nearly $1 billion to good causes. At 2010's CGI, the Postcode Lottery committed with Greenpeace, the Marine Stewardship Council, and the World Wildlife Fund to protect ocean biodiversity and establish marine protected areas. These efforts placed them among the top marine philanthropic funders. National Geographic's Pristine Seas groundbreaking program is helping create 27 of the largest marine protected areas in the world, protecting an area bigger than twice the size of India. Marine ecologist Enrique Sala, National Geographic Explorer in Residence, leads these efforts, essential for preserving our oceans for future generations.
Please welcome Sikwit van Aken, Enrique Sala, and President Bill Clinton.
So, as you know, the theme of this year's meeting is what's working. So I am really honored to be sharing the stage with Sikwit van Aken, the CEO of one of the most innovative funding organizations I have ever encountered. The Postcode Lottery Group runs private charity lotteries in 5 European countries, and on several occasions, I've had the opportunity to join them and see firsthand how remarkably their model has communities winning together and supporting effective charities at the same time. Year after year, the Postcode Lottery Group has also answered CGI's call to action. They've made commitments to save the oceans, to protect rhinos, to increase access to the carbon market for smallholder farmers, and much, much more, all to preserve our planet and to support its people. I am so grateful for their extraordinary partnership and enduring work. Now my friend Sigrid is going to pay special tribute to Enrique Sala and his extraordinary work protecting our oceans. Sigrid.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's really great to be back at CGI, connecting with so many inspiring people and initiatives. Postcode Lottery Group is one of the largest charity funders, and we know every player in our community lotteries helps change lives for the better. By turning zip codes, that's what we call postcodes, into lottery tickets for good, we are helping create a healthier, fairer, greener world, supporting social initiatives that protect nature, defend human rights, especially of women and girls, and support thousands of community projects all around the world. Now, you probably have noticed that I've not come empty-handed. So golden envelopes are something our postcode lottery winners and charity partners are very familiar with. And today, I brought this all the way over from Europe on behalf of our millions of players to celebrate and recognize the outstanding work of you, Enrique, and your team. So, 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, President Clinton and Enrique Sala were on this stage with a commitment to help protect 2 million square kilometers of ocean in 5 years with the Pristine Seas program. Well, Enrique, your team made it a reality in only 2 years. And guess what? Since then, they've tripled their impact. Safeguarding the ocean through marine protected areas is the best way forward. And you, Enrique, are showing us how. We are delighted to present this award to the Pristine Seas project.
The Oscar goes to? Wow. Thank you so much, Sigrid. Thank you so much, Sigrid. Mr. President, thank you so much. Everything we care about here is possible because of the ocean. The ocean is our life support system, but we are abusing it. We are taking fish out of the ocean faster than they can reproduce. 90% of the large fish are gone. And global warming is destroying coral reefs and other vital ecosystems along the livelihoods they support. But there is one solution that we've talked about that works. Marine protected areas where the ocean bounces back to life, helping to replenish the areas around so there is more fish to catch. And the more life is in the ocean, the more of our carbon emissions the ocean is able to capture and store. At National Geographic Pristine Seas, we've been working with communities and governments to create 28 of the largest marine protected areas in the world, covering an area twice the size of India or 2/3 the size of the United States. And the good news is that countries have agreed, the countries of the world agreed to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. That's 30 by 30. Yet, Today, only 8% of the ocean is protected. So we have a lot of work to do. But President Clinton says, and we heard it yesterday, that we need to believe in possibility. And I believe 30 by 30 is possible because some of the countries we have worked with have already protected 30% of their waters before 2030. I believe it's possible, but we need a lot of support. And this support from the Postcode Lottery Group is so important. You are investing in the future of the planet. And I also want to thank you, Mr. President, and CGI for making this special moment possible. So we continue committed to this vital target because if we save the ocean, we save the world. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome back Katie Couric.
Hi, everyone. Me again. Well, obviously I hit the jackpot this morning because I am so thrilled to be talking to my two next guests as well. Please welcome to the stage Hamdi Ulukaya, CEO of Chobani, and Lorene Powell-Jobs, CEO of Emerson Collective. So I know that both of you have created and implemented new innovative models for approaching both for-profit and philanthropic ventures. But I want to start by having you, Hamdi, tell us a little bit about your story. How you started and grew Chobani is so inspiring and I think a testament to the American dream. I'm going to start you out by saying in 2005 you decided to buy an abandoned craft yogurt factory in upstate New York and create Chobani, my personal favorite yogurt. 5 years later, you had built a billion-dollar business. So can you share a very condensed version of how you made this happen, Hamdi?
Yeah, I was probably the only person in that little town with an accent. And walk into this place, I actually talked about it in a TED Talk, it reminded me a place where another business was abandoned in the eastern part of Turkey. So the business as usual. A company decides and just closes and no one comes to see it, and the factories is just the steam's cuts off. And then you have factory workers, 55 of them at the time. When I visited, it was just working so hard to close it. Something, I don't know, there are a couple of realities. One is yogurt in this country at that time was really bad.
You describe it as like opening a can of paint.
Yeah, it was awful. It's like,
and you knew what was good yogurt, right?
Yeah, of course, coming from Turkey. The part I didn't understand is when you lived in upstate New York, you go to a Price Chopper or any store, and you look at the yogurt options, and that along with any other food options, it's just full of a lot of bad stuff. I mean, you literally couldn't call it yogurt. It was candy. But then you come to New York and you go to some fancy store to shop, and they had some yogurts from Greece, some other places. What I couldn't understand is where you lived and what kind of income you had determined what kind of yogurt you eat. I mean, when it comes to yogurt, can the world be flat? Like, can everybody have...
Why can't everyone have good yogurt?
Yeah, exactly. So that at least we can do. Product was bad. I had no experience of any business. I did not study business.
But your parents were dairy farmers.
Dairy farmers, right. But I never done any business on a large scale other than making some cheese. I never knew anyone who had done business or gone through this kind of journey. I am coming from complete unaware of anything when it comes to business. The only thing I know is I could make yogurt, maybe people will love it and people will buy it. I look at the world that we are facing today. You know, I'm on the SDG board, and they said only 17% of the goals are met on the SDG Sustainable Development Goals. We are so behind. Things cannot be worse than what it is in some dimension to another one. But I look at that little town, that little factory, that was the end of it. That was the end of that town. That was the end of that factory. That was the end of those people who were working there. And 5 years later, that day was the worst thing has happened, that factory was closed. 5 years later, one of the best things happened, that factory was closed. Because that factory was 5 to 10 times bigger, more productive, more product was coming out, the farmers were busy, the house prices were going up. So what I mean by that is we will figure it out. If I figured it out, everyone can figure out anything. And if the human spirit can come together, we can figure out to come out of any trouble that we're facing. And you know, you learn along the way. I mean, there were a million times I would have died, bankrupt, or commit suicide, whatever that is. But we survived.
And you not only survived, but your company is an employee-first philosophy. And I even talked to some of the people who were giving me coffee this morning because you've entered the coffee and beer industry. You're expanding. And tell me a little bit about what it means to be an employee-first company and how that's manifested itself in your businesses.
I grew up in the northeast of Turkey. I'm Kurd. I'm a nomad. From the mountains, I hated the business, and I hated the people in business. I blamed them for everything that we were facing, trouble. And probably business would have been the last thing I would get involved. Upstate, when I worked in a farm, I had a different version of business in those little towns. That we were involved in communities. The people were different than I saw. And I realized that there is a side of business can be extremely powerful. You know, it could change lives. The part that I hated, I had one goal. I don't want to become a person I grew up hating. So how do I do that? Or how do I not follow the people who closed this factory? How do I do complete opposite of it? So you have walls from the community, you open those walls. The employees pay the first price when things are worse. How do you make them in front of it? And I started as a factory worker, so I worked in the factory for 7 years. I never left. So I said, anything that we do is the frontline factory workers has to be on the top, on the front of it. And the second part is if you're going to make any changes in the world, if you don't start with your own people, with your own community, there's something disconnection. Like, you know, I don't find that to be real journey. So you have to start from there. If anybody listens to me from my own company says, the guy is right or the guy is full of shit, it really depends on what you do actually every day in there. And that's just very easy but hard. It's easy because if you mean it every day, you practice it. It's hard because it's every day.
Lorene, you know, it sounds like...
If I may, what Hamdi's describing is a 21st century factory town. And so you know how we used to have these company towns across America where there was such a center of gravity with the community and the civic life and the cultural life and a shared employer. And so what you're talking about is recreating that type of community and accountability to each other that I think people feel is sorely missing in our country. So it's really beautiful to hear this story, Hamdi.
And bringing back sort of the whole notion of civic pride. And it sounds like Chobani, philosophically, Lorene, is very much up your alley, that Hamdi is the kind of leader you look to. And you invest in companies that serve the public good. But like Hamdi, it's done through a lens of what makes good business sense, right? So can you explain to everyone your investment strategy, Lorene, and how you decide where to put your dollars?
Sure. Several decades ago, if I had met Hamdi, I would like to think that we would have been smart enough to invest in him.
Don't we all?
Because what we look for are mission-based, values-based entrepreneurs who want to come together and do hard things and do important things. And we have found over the years that while we have a deep and highly rewarding philanthropic practice, we also find that using for-profit companies and entrepreneurs who want to create for-profit endeavors that are mission aligned can make the philanthropic work so much more powerful. It's like rocket fuel, because the way that business and capital markets work is that the more successful you are, the more capital you attract. In the philanthropic sector, that's not how it works. It has a different type of business model. Oftentimes, for nonprofit organizations, the more successful they become, some early funders will drop away, so it doesn't naturally attract funding. And so we really like to see how for-profit and nonprofit can work hand in glove. We do it in education. We have for-profit investing in really amazing curriculum companies and technology companies that allow for the back end to be smooth and operations to flow. And then obviously a lot of philanthropic work within education. We also do it environmentally, as we're looking philanthropically for a just transition for communities as we move off of fossil fuels. We also have met so many entrepreneurs coming out of universities, coming out of communities, who are problem solving on the ground for energy sources and new home building materials and new types of ways for agriculture to thrive. I don't know if you're interested in fund regenerative agriculture, but we find that really fascinating and a big opportunity. And obviously new battery technology and recycling of clothing and batteries. So creative people are everywhere, and we like to follow them through whatever legal structure they find to be most complementary.
I know that so much of the work of the Emerson Collective focuses on long-term systemic change, and I'm curious, Lorene, how do you maintain momentum and commitment when it can take decades or longer to see actual progress in issues like climate change or immigration reform?
Well, there's successes all along that journey, and when there are long-term, really amazing generational philanthropies that are part of a whole movement to improve this social fabric of society, move things forward, and then pass the baton. I think for us, while we are part of that glorious fabric, I also find that kind of solving some problems along the way is highly gratifying. And so for example, in education, if we work with a nonprofit called College Track, and we're based in 13 communities around the United States, and we work with students who are first in their families to desire a college education. They often don't have the knowledge base within their families or their communities to take the right classes and get the right advice and be prepared economically and financially for college. And then we support them all the way through college completion. So we've been doing this work for 27 years. We now have close to 2,000 college graduates who are all first in their families, and then of that, over 100 have postgraduate degrees. So now we have doctors and lawyers and PhDs. And the ripple effects for each individual, who now number 5,000 a year, will be profound. But for me, to meet an individual who has reached her dream or his dream of college education and then a pathway to a new career, that is so rewarding all day long. That gives me so much energy. So yes, we haven't changed the system of public education to have it be the great equalizer and the great opportunity for social and economic mobility. Not yet, but one life changed is so powerful and so rewarding.
I wanted to spend the rest of our time talking a little bit about immigration. To say it's become a hot-button issue is a massive understatement. And Hamdi, you launched something called the Tent Partnership for Refugees in 2016, which mobilizes the business community to support refugees around the world. Talk to us about the critical role business can play in addition to governments and NGOs to deal with the refugee and immigration crisis.
Yeah, I go back to, thank you for that. My journey with refugees really started in my Chobani journey. When we hired everybody back, I heard this town in Utica, where I used to live. There's a settlement place, maybe IRC or two other, I think it's an IRC place, the settling refugees, where State Department vetted and then UNHCR through UNHCR, wherever in the world, they literally come and settle, and they have right to work. And then I realized that they have a hard time finding jobs. And we are hiring everybody. It was kind of community work, and I went to the refugee center. I said, what's the problem? Why? Simple things. They don't have driver license or cars. They don't speak the language, like you mentioned your daughter, teaching English to some of the refugees. It's important, but without that, it's hard. They don't have the training the job is needed in the area. And the last one is, I don't know these people. Do I want to get them to my jobs? Unfamiliarity. We realized that there are 19 different nationalities, 16 different languages are spoken in that refugee center. I said, why don't we start something? Let's get buses, let's get translators, and let's get training at the work, and let them come in. And we end up having, 30% of our workforce become refugees and immigrants. And when the Yazidis got attacked, the Kurds, like me, I went to UNHCR, to Geneva. I said, how can I help? The first thing come to your mind is, I give money, I get tent, I get blankets, which is needed, needs to happen. There, while I was there, realized that involvement of business is very limited, if anything, only few. No businesses are involved. And yet, millions, and today is maybe 2 times, 3 times more, refugees are all over the world stuck. They're not back to work. They don't go back to where they come from. They are in the camps, they're in the cities, in the towns, like human potential completely stuck.
Yes.
And they have no place to go.
Right.
And I see what happened with the people who had job at Chobani. I saw some of them came as far as, it's like a miracle happening. They buy homes, their children go to schools, they stand on their feet. I don't want handout, I just want to have an opportunity to get back to life. Through job, I can get my dignity. Through job, I can provide the community and society. Through job, I can provide to my own family. And I said, what if I share my experience at Chobani for other companies? So it started in 2016. I have to tell you, this place, CGI, and I tell President Clinton and everybody, the board of Tent happened right from here. I connected with people here. I told my story first time in the stage here. And today, that idea is over 450 companies, multinational companies. We have organized all over the world, hundreds of thousands of people access to job. And what we aim is above and beyond the politics. Can we meet somewhere where we can meet in human dimension, but actual logic makes sense? Economic studies, marketing studies, social studies, everything says within 3 to 5 years, hiring refugees, good for the company, good for the community, good for the society, good for the country. And forget about what happens to the life of refugee. So I think the last part, which Lauren and her organization and a couple of other ones, that we do the work in Mexico, is how do we connect for the large scale refugees to companies who want to hire them. The last point I'd like to make is I went to Mexico. It's an amazing country. We made a study that 75% of the refugees passing through Mexico to the US border would love to stay in Mexico if they have an opportunity to have a job. There are over 2 million job openings in Mexico. The economy is blooming. And then guess what? 80% of the Mexican people will reward the companies who are hiring refugees. It's mind-blowing. And what's the problem? We never communicate, we never get together. Through our ambassador in Mexico City, we made a coalition of 60 companies coming together. FAMSA is being one of them, Walmart, and every one of them you can think of. And we had one of the largest business coalition come together and say, we're going to hire refugees. We are for refugees in Mexico, so we don't have this human suffering to happen.
Right. And by the way, the Mexican government wants Mexico to be a destination country, not only a transit country. And so in order to fill these close to 2 million open jobs, they have asked the Business Coalition and then some of civil society, some of philanthropy where we're falling in, but as a large public-private partnership to help solve this problem. They have adequate housing stocks, so we're helping to build out these multi-purpose centers that will allow for healthcare and assessment and job placement and housing placement to happen in southern Mexico, in Tapachulas and in Huixla. And we're also working with UNHCR in order to make sure that that care is given to the refugee population. But it makes so much sense for people who often have a shared language to stay in Mexico, to make their life in Mexico a place that actually is looking to welcome them. And then it'll release some of the pressure on our southern border as well.
I want to ask you all, I hate to end on kind of a negative note, but we have seen so much disturbingly xenophobic and racist discourse emerge surrounding immigrants, most notably, most recently, the false allegations and misinformation about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. Can you share your thoughts on how immigration has been weaponized and used to stir up hate in this country, and how we can change the conversation?
Yes. I think when we zoom out and we remind ourselves how our country was founded, the ideals that were founded on, right here in the Hudson River, the Statue of Liberty, welcoming all who are coming, who have need, who want to create a life here. We all know that that is in our DNA as the United States of America, something that President Reagan said. You know, if you're born in France, you're French. If you're born in Germany, you're German. But if you're born anywhere and you decide to come to the United States, you're American. And we have to remind ourselves that this is all of our journey. I know it's been historically over the last several hundred years, often when we have an influx of immigrants, there's a tendency to close the door and to demonize before we metabolize the newcomers and have a welcoming attitude. But there are organizations like Welcoming America that are working across the United States with communities, with families who actually wish to be welcoming to new arrivals. I think that the hateful rhetoric does not represent the vast majority of Americans, and it doesn't represent who we are and understand the lifeblood of America that is fueled by immigrants and immigrant energy.
And do you think we can find, Hamdi, the political will to come up with some of these very logical solutions, given the fact that immigrants are now such a potent political weapon in this country?
And not only in this country, it's almost, you see it almost everywhere.
True.
The reality is, whether climate, conflict, economic, throughout the history, people move, and it seems like post-pandemic it came to a different dimension. And if we don't collectively put our mind together, we get together, and we will never find a common solution for humanity. And without this solution, we're not going anywhere. This is the important migration, refugees, the move. There's a lot of catastrophic human tragedies is happening along the way. And what I find is the political will goes up and down, depends on. And this is highly politicized, unfortunately, and it goes into and sometimes the angle that hurts the brothers, their sisters, their kids. You know, it hurts. It hurts if you're in a refugee camp. It hurts if you're in a town. And like Lauren said, so many millions, they know they're just like us. They're all. No one will put their family in a small boat in a nighttime to a 2 mile sea, knowing that the boat before didn't make it. I have children. Yeah, we all have. Imagine putting your own children into that journey. I've been to a lot of borders. This is desperation.
Yes.
And what we can do as business community, we can have lasting solution to this. Win, 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 win. And we have to tell stories. And the storytellers, and we have to come to a place like this, the CGI, and tell stories, inspire each other, and share successes where we find, so we don't waste time, and collaborate with each other. It doesn't matter who gets the credit. And every time a refugee gets a job, the world is a better place.
Well, Hamdi and Lorene, what a privilege, honestly. Thank you both so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Hamdi.
Please welcome Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, thank you. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first satellite, marking humanity's first stride into the vast expanse of space. And then in 1961, we witnessed a monumental achievement as Yuri Gagarin became the first human to journey into space, a feat that captured the imagination of people around the globe. And of course, we cannot forget 1969, when American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history with the first successful human landing on the moon, a triumph that showcased the boundless potential of human invention and spirit. Over the course of our history, humankind has dared to exceed the limitations of possibility. We've dreamed the inconceivable. We've built the unimaginable. And as a result, we live in a time where accessibility to everything, everywhere, all at once, rests in the palm of our hands. Yet, while we celebrate global achievements and their impact, there is still critical work to do. And so, I stand before you today to speak about the pervasive threat that our online world poses to us, especially our children, if we allow the status quo to remain. In an age where our lives are intertwined with technology, we cannot afford to only see the online world as a space for profitability, competition, and rapid growth. Instead, we must come together to ensure the digital space is one that fosters well-being, connection, and hope. Young people today are disproportionately affected by negative experiences online and mental health issues stemming from their digital interactions. They know it. The statistics prove it. They're navigating an environment that is often hostile and overwhelming. Reports of anxiety, depression, and social isolation linked to these platforms have surged in recent years, creating a crisis that cannot be ignored. These challenges are compounded by the relentless spread of unreliable and unfounded information, leaving many feeling isolated, confused, and scared. These are not distant problems. They're epidemics currently testing our resolve, and they cannot be ignored. My lock screen is a picture of my kids. What's yours? These children, and thousands more, meant the world to their families. The beautiful faces you see before you, their smiles, their dreams, all lost. All too soon, and all because of social media. It's why we launched the Parents Network, a global community that provides crucial support to parents whose children have suffered from the harmful effects of social media. And it is because of them that we at the Archwell Foundation are committed to this issue. Through trauma-informed practices, our network helps parents come together to forge strong bonds, offering healing support through community. This safe and free-to-access peer support not only offers invaluable resources and advice, it is guided by a licensed facilitator, ensuring that no one has to navigate this journey alone. Our platform provides opportunity for parents to turn their pain into purpose, ultimately changing the very system that stole their child. As the digital landscape has evolved, we've seen rising polarization, social unrest, and a disconnect that often manifests itself in violence and fear. Personal social connections have fallen secondary to alternative digital realities. These platforms are designed to create addiction. Young people are kept there by mindless, endless, numbing scrolling, being force-fed content that no child should ever be exposed to. It's not free will. I, like many of you, did not grow up with a phone. Young people today possess an incredible understanding of technology that older generations may struggle to grasp. They are digital natives, adept at navigating online spaces and spotting harmful trends. Their artistry and fresh perspectives allow them to envision solutions that we might overlook. They are also part of a collective who use their voice to speak up when something is wrong. Deep commitments to social justice and inclusivity drive them to advocate for a future that we can be proud of. So we must empower them. We must listen to their experiences, understand their perspectives, and provide them with the resources that they need to navigate and shape the digital world, something that we keep at the core of our work. We must raise them to know that IQ without EQ will always fall short. We must provide them with spaces to innovate and advocate for solutions that prioritize safety, respect, and empathy. And while we embolden both youth and parents to be in the conversation, we must also hold those in power accountable. The first ever global ministerial meeting focused on ending violence to children will take place in Colombia this November. And it is where, for the first time, there can be global agreement on prioritizing child safety and protection online. Our laws and regulations are different state to state, country to country. We may have different backgrounds, viewpoints, beliefs, and even access to the internet itself. But the one thing that we can universally agree on is the safety of our children. So why do the leaders of these insanely powerful social media companies still refuse to change? Why are we holding them to the lowest ethical standards? In any other circumstance, a business would commit all resources to fixing the bug. Instead of providing parents with more tips and tricks for navigating hostile environments, shareholders need to demand change. Some say kids will be kids, and, well, that may well be true. Kids may get into trouble. I know a thing or two about that. But our kids are being targeted. The harmful effects of social media are made by design. While we embolden both youth and parents, we must also hold digital platforms accountable. Surely, none of us want to live in a world where there is no consequence or accountability. Parenting doesn't end at birth of a child. Neither does founding a company. Whether parent or CEO, we have a duty and a responsibility to see our creations through. If corporations unabashedly lack responsibility, it doesn't mean we should do the same. Their platforms may be under our fingertips, but we have the fate of the future, their future, in our hands. When many in our world today seem to conflate opinion as fact and fact as opinion, we have to work hard to seek and reveal truth. For as long as we're debating over lies, we will forever be divided. And when so much of our future is uncertain, we need to meet global insecurity with compassion rather than hate. Inclusivity and equity are not optional. They are the bedrock upon which we must build our communication and community. And fear, orchestrated at the highest levels, needs to be seen for what it is, a tactic to mask indifference and a failure to seek real solutions. As a growing movement, the Parents Network is committed to this journey. We need platforms that mirror our highest values, designed with safety in mind. But in the meantime, we can't wait. Our kids can't wait. We need to create programs that teach digital literacy, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking. We need to equip our youth with the skills they need to identify and combat online threats. We need a better digital future, one that we all deserve. We were promised a human experience. Instead, we've been a human experiment. This is an invitation to each and every one of you to open your eyes, ears, and hearts to these realities and to channel our power, resources, and intelligence toward meaningful action. All we have today, in this moment, stems from the defiance of boundaries we once thought existed. We've split the atom. We've walked on the moon. We are more than equipped to tackle this. The future of our world and our youth depend on it. We all just need to want it enough. And I know that I do. Thank you.
Please welcome Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Emma Walmsley, and Dr. Chelsea Clinton.
Goodness, thank you so much. I'm really excited for this conversation with two people I deeply admire and I think are perfectly positioned to help us kind of think through the theme of our morning, everything, everywhere, all at once. Because certainly I think that adage is true most of all when it comes to health. And as we have seen throughout human history, and certainly over the last few years, when our health is at risk or imperiled, everything is at risk. And Emma, I know from kind of a GSK perspective, you understand that kind of interconnectivity isn't only rhetoric, but reality. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if you could just share kind of how you think about kind of this charge to try to be everywhere all at once, while also, of course, having to focus some of your energy, efforts, and research on what you think are the most pressing challenges and where you can make a difference.
Sure. Well, thanks, Chelsea. I mean, it's absolutely true that we are facing into a very high-pressure, multi-stakeholder set of huge demographic, societal, economic, political shifts, all happening at a record scale and pace. And, that affects every industry, but exactly as you say, it feels especially acute in healthcare. People are living longer. The over 60s already outnumber the under 5s, but often in many places in worse health. We've got this surge in comorbidities, whether it's obesity on the rise. We've got more than 50 million people worldwide living with dementia. 1 in 5 of us will develop cancer. And specifically, the burden and threat of infectious diseases, especially for the most vulnerable, is unacceptably high. Healthcare systems are under unbelievable and unsustainable pressure, and half the world's population simply does not have access to the healthcare that it needs. And yet, the economic and societal health of nations depends on the health of their populations. And people, simply put, are counting on companies like mine and our industry to deliver medicines and vaccines they need and can rely on. So at GSK, we really want to contribute to this at serious scale. Our goal is to reach 2.5 billion people by the end of the decade, and we focus on 3 simple things to try and navigate through it. The first one, and it's really the core of our job, is innovation. There are extraordinary leaps forward in science and technology that mean, for example, HIV used to be a terrible diagnosis, can now be a manageable condition, or actually prevented completely with just a handful of injections a year. And we're also beginning to be able to develop vaccines against pathogens that were once thought impossible, like malaria. And I have to acknowledge immediately how grateful we are to Tedros and the WHO, not only for their partnership, but for their pushing to help us roll out that vaccine to young children in sub-Saharan Africa. We're also working on 13 of the pathogens that you've prioritized at the WHO, and we're very ambitious for a new TB vaccine, which we're partnered on with both the Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust. But secondly, it's about access, because there is no point in having innovation if it doesn't reach the people that need it. And that starts with responsible, sustainable approach to pricing, like our tiered vaccine pricing, or that we open up our IP, actually, to the medicines patent pool so that around 90% of people living with HIV who are on treatment in lower-income countries are actually on a regimen based on one of our antiretrovirals. And then our third and last priority, to get ahead of disease, literally, is about focusing on preventing it. Prevention. We have to partner with policymakers and health systems to prioritize prevention and earlier intervention to actually keep people well, supporting healthier lives in the community through access to vaccinations, screenings, and timely treatment, and getting also ahead of systemic threats like AMR or indeed the next pandemic. So innovation, access, prevention, all in partnership is how we work hard to try and get ahead of disease together.
I think Dr. Tedros may have the hardest job in the world because the world expects him to help keep us healthy and to help us regain our health if we fall ill. And so I wonder, Dr. Tedros, if you can just reflect on, in the myriad of challenges facing us now, from mpox to COVID to age-old scourges that Emma mentioned, including malaria and tuberculosis, as well as kind of rising threats to our mental health and well-being that we just heard Prince Harry discuss as an urgent call to action, particularly when it comes to our children here on the stage. Given the improbably high expectations of you and WHO and the myriad of challenges that seem to multiply daily, how do you think about prioritization and pushing forward so that you're always proving progress is possible?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to join. And most of what I was hoping to say, I think Emma had said it, especially on the challenges he said. So without repeating, I will maybe add a couple of challenges the world is facing. Number one now is the conflict that we see in many parts of the world. It's becoming very difficult to deliver services in conflict areas. I just came from visiting Sudan and Chad. And the situation in Sudan is very, very tragic. More than 12 million people have been displaced, and half of the population, which is 25 million, needs aid. More than 80% of the health infrastructure in the conflict areas is destroyed. And I met mothers in the IDP camps and inside Sudan, and also the refugee camps in Chad. I visited Adre, which is the border town between Chad and Sudan. And what they tell you is so, so harrowing. Their houses were burned, their crops were destroyed, their animals were stolen. And they came to Chad with nothing. And as I said earlier, so the trend now, the serious challenge is delivering service in conflict areas. And the same is true with Gaza, as you know. More than 41,000 deaths now, 2/3 of them women and children. That should have been enough to end the war. But it's really ongoing. As you have heard, we had a very successful immunization for polio in Gaza. But imagine children are saved from polio today, but if they're dying tomorrow because of the conflict, so you say, what's the point? And then Ukraine, the same thing. You know, it's women and children who are the most affected. But in all scenarios, the best medicine is peace. And all the conflicts could be addressed through political solutions. I'm a child of war. I know the smell of war. I know the image of war. And I know the sound of war. In war, except destruction, you get nothing. And when I was a child, my mother used to pray for me to survive one day at a time. And I know how mothers were impacted then, and I know how children were impacted, me one of them. Of course, becoming a director general from a survivor, just praying for one day is a miracle. Miracles happen. But that's why I always oppose war and violence, because there is no solution through violence and war. So that's one challenge which is trending now, and globally, as you know, almost everybody is worried, and I think we need peace, and as I said, it's the best medicine. And then the second, in addition to the other things you said on NCDs, mental health, infectious diseases, and so on, is climate change. The climate crisis is a health crisis, and it's affecting us seriously, and it's visible, palpable. Malaria, dengue, and other infectious diseases, cholera, are now on the increase due to climate change. Non-communicable diseases due to heat waves, cardiovascular diseases is also on the increase. And mitigation, adaptation with a sense of urgency will be important, because when we talk about climate crisis, it's about now. And as you know, with fossil fuels, we know oil, natural gas, coal contribute more than 80% of the pollution, actually. And we know where to focus. The only thing that's missing is the political commitment to really implement. So these are the two issues, maybe the major challenges I would like to say. But if there is a will, there is a way, and we have known tools. I don't want to go into details on what should be done, but I think the key is the political commitment will be important to mobilize all the solutions we need.
You know, another area where we need political commitment, Emma, is I know one that you at GSK have really focused on, which is antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah.
You know, which you referred to earlier as AMR, and I knew what you were talking about, but I don't know if everyone in the audience knew what you were talking about. And we know that that too, as we were just discussing backstage, is not disconnected from conflict or climate change. So I wonder if you can share a little bit about kind of the threat that AMR poses, why you're so worried about it, but also what you're doing about it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I deeply agree with Tedros. The science is so clear that the link between our planet's health and people's health is incontrovertible, and 3 of the top causes of death worldwide are in some way related to lung disease. So this is an urgent health issue as well as the infectious diseases. But you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the main reasons I'm in New York this week is for the UN high-level meeting, which is all about antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. And the reality is that if we don't do something about this, wake up, and make some changes, that 40 million people are going to lose their lives to AMR, to antibiotic-resistant infections by 2050. That's around 1 death every 3 minutes, and I think will take 2 years off global life expectancy. And you know, thinking about your theme here today, AMR really is everything, everywhere, all at once. It touches on so many of the challenges that we're all facing. It is a crisis of health equity, first. Sub-Saharan Africa sees some of the highest death rates due to AMR. And there are lots of factors at play here, including access to high-quality, effective antibiotics. It is absolutely a crisis of climate and nature loss, with warming temperatures and more flooding, meaning bacterial infection rates are on the rise. And it is a crisis of conflict, because tragically, war zones create ideal breeding grounds for resistant infections. And I read some just tragic research recently about what's going on in Ukrainian hospitals at the moment. So, you know, I think AMR needs to keep all of us up at night. Access to modern medicine is at stake, from the most minor injuries to complex cancer treatments to, you know, childbirth again, is all going to become riskier because that medical backstop is under serious threat. So what do we do about it? Well, I think from our point of view, and this is absolutely a question of partnership, because nobody can take this on alone, and it's going to be a question of policy too. The first thing is we really want to go for smarter access, and by that, to antibiotics. By that I mean unblocking access in a way that is informed by stronger surveillance of these bugs, diagnostics, and data. That's why we've just joined with civil society and governments to fund GARD-P, which is building a more robust and data-driven approach to access to high-quality, effective antibiotics. It's also about stewardship, from responsible manufacturing of antimicrobials to education to appropriate prescribing and usage compliance. All of those things are crucial to smarter access. And we need better innovation, a pipeline of new antibiotics sooner. We at GSK have about 30 AMR-relevant projects, 13 of them targeting the most critical pathogens from the WHO. But the industry level and pace of innovation for AMR has actually halved in the last decade. So what I'm hoping from this week is we're going to see some collective action from governments to stimulate discovery and development of the new and different antimicrobials that we so desperately need, which again needs to be built on a foundation of prevention and more partnership. We've got to stop the infections happening in the first place. That's better control, access to sanitation, more vaccines. And we've got to work together in new ways to counter resistance. So we invested £45 million this year in the Fleming Initiative with the Imperial College in London, which is all about trying to find and test out new AMR solutions. So it is a real, present danger that's going to become a much, much more serious problem. But there are reasons for optimism, and that's why it's on the agenda this week, and there is absolutely no time to lose.
Well, there are certainly reasons for optimism, partly because of kind of the leadership from WHO and GSK, although I am still stumbling over what you shared a minute ago about kind of the level of research around AMR that has dropped so precipitously.
Yeah.
And so hopefully kind of the focused attention, kind of a new set of incentives and also public pressure collectively will kind of drive more research from academia and industry alike. Dr. Tedros, I want to kind of pick up on Emma's theme of partnership. We here at CGI and the Clinton Health Access Initiative have been so grateful to be in partnership with WHO in many ways over now decades. And so I know kind of how kind of innovative you are, even thinking about kind of what partnership can effectuate and sustain. I wonder if you can share a couple of examples, recent or not, of partnerships related to climate change and health, or kind of any other area that you want to share.
Yeah. No, thank you. I will come to the partnership issue later. Maybe a comment on AMR. One of the major challenges is AMR, and we even call it a silent antimicrobial resistance is a silent pandemic. And as you know, we will have the high-level meeting of the UN after tomorrow. That's on Thursday. And countries are now agreeing on a political declaration on governance, on financing, on use of antibiotics in animals, in humans, in agriculture. And there are very good commitments already outlined. I think what's important now, though, is we have this cycle of commit and forget. So I hope this commitment will be implemented, and we will not repeat the cycle of commit and forget. Then to partnership, maybe two examples with the private sector and also with a foundation or initiative like the CHAI. When I was Minister of Health in Ethiopia, President Clinton visited us. And he asked me, what are your priorities? In what areas would you like us to help you? Then I said, can you help me in hospital reform, whether it's the secondary or the primary hospitals? Because most of the donor money actually goes to very sexy disease-specific support, while health service reform doesn't get the attention it deserves. And he said, of course, we are here to support you. We will support you based on your priorities, and that's why we're here. If you don't want us, we go, but if you want, if this is your wish, we will support you. And then we started the hospital reform. CHAI, the Clinton Foundation, brought Yale University, and then the partnership grew, and many other partners joined, and we did the reform, and the reform resulted in a well-governed, led by a CEO health system that improved the quality of services in hospitals, that minimized the death in hospitals with better processes. And that's one area where I can say a very successful partnership. It really was a significant one. But one thing that impressed me, and which is very important here, is normally when we come as donors to countries, we try to prescribe instead of asking the countries, what do you want? Because countries know the problem, they know the root cause of the problem, they know the solutions. So it's very important to support them based on their priorities. And that's why that project was a success. And not only President Clinton, but other members of the team were saying exactly the same. We support you based on your priorities. And the other partnership is with Emma, with GSK. After the malaria vaccine was proven to be effective, but there were some challenges, financial and so on. This is in 2019, and before we moved into the piloting, there were signals that GSK may drop out And I called Emma and said, no, this is very important. I had to nudge her.
This is very effective.
Strong. Then she said, okay, this is the malaria vaccine called RTSS. And then we agreed, but she was really committed, so it didn't take much to really agree on going forward. And now we have one vaccine, RTSS, and I did my studies, my master's and PhD on malaria. So for me, it was personal, actually. Okay. And that partnership is one of the very successful, and children in Africa are being saved because of the RTSS vaccine. So this is partnership between WHO, a global institution, and pharma industry. And by the way, Gates Foundation and many other partners, Gavi, Global Fund, and others. And the CHAI partnership, it's country level, based on country priorities, and making a difference in reducing deaths, especially in hospitals, and improving the quality of care. And we have Joe here, the patient safety champion, and that was part of the package of the reform, the reform that made a difference. So partnerships work, but partnerships should be focused on a goal and based on putting the countries in the driver's seat, especially at country level. Thank you.
Well, partnerships work also when we have extraordinary leaders like the two of you. So really, thank you both so much for being here. Good luck in hopefully tackling all the partnerships that are needed to help us finally kind of put AMR in the rearview mirror. We're incredibly grateful to both of you. So please join me in giving our panelists a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thinking about you. Every single day, guess I'm really missing you. And all those things we used to do. Hey girl, what's up? It used to be just me and you.
I spend my time just thinking about you. Every single day, guess I'm really missing you. And all those things we used to do. Hey girl, what's up, yo? What's up?
Halfway, right at the borderline is where I'm going away. For you, I'll be looking out night and day. Took my heart to the limit, and this is where I'll stay. I can't go any further than this. I want you so bad, it's my only wish. Girl, I travel around the world and even sail the 7 seas. Across the universe and go to other galaxies. Just tell me where to go, just tell me where you wanna meet. I navigate myself to take me where you be.